Hello everyone and welcome to this week's edition of Women's World. I'm Hala Al-Hamalawi and today we'll be talking about a very important topic, that is violence against women. We'll be hosting here in the studio Mrs. Rawan Yusuf to tell us more about her participation in the conference that was recently held to combat violence against women. Also, we have a special report in this regard, but I'll be right back with a look at some interesting news for women, so stay tuned. And our first headline reads, Dr. Amira Abdelaziz, the first Arab woman to attain the title of UN Ambassador for Women and Peace. Lecturer at the Sorbonne University in Paris, Dr. Amira Abdelaziz won the title of UN Ambassador for Women and Peace. Dr. Amira won the title for her efforts in social work and her interest in women's issues in general and Arab women's issues in particular. Through her participation in international events, she has been calling for the political, economic and social empowerment of women, in addition to raising awareness regarding awareness campaigns through conferences and seminars. The Arab Women Organization hails the appointment of Basima Al-Haqqani as the First Minister of Communication in Morocco. The Arab Women Organization hailed the appointment of Basima Al-Haqqani as the First Minister of Communication in Morocco, saying that this decision will have a positive effect on enhancing the participation of women in decision-making posts. Ambassador Mirvat El-Tilawi congratulated the Moroccan people on the appointment, saying that Basima Al-Haqqani has great achievements in the development process of Morocco. And the world's oldest woman celebrates her 117th birthday. Emma Morano, believed to be the world's oldest living woman, celebrated her 117th birthday. Morano was born November 1899 and has witnessed 2 world wars and more than 90 Italian governments. She was also among the first women in Italy to get a divorce back in 1938. The conference was recently held here in Egypt to combat violence against women. We have more details in this report. November the 25th and concluded on Saturday. The title was a message for every woman and girl to be whoever she wants: educated, capable, ready, empowered, creative, strong and innovative. The campaign included a number of activities such as raising awareness on rejecting all forms of violence against girls and women and collaborating the people's efforts with the government's efforts to combat violence. Dr. Mas Said, director of the Anti-Sexual Harassment and Violence Against Women Unit, said that the unit was established 3 years ago and was supported by Cairo University. She said that it is the first of its kind in Egypt and the Middle East. Meanwhile, NCW member Dr. Suzanne Kallini talked about the media's projection of women, especially in drama and movies. She called for holding workshops of media people to communicate means of combating violence against women in the media. She added that all forms of violence affect women in a negative way. She also underlined NCW's rejection of the recent amendments to the child seeing law, adding that it is considered as one form of violence against women. Strong and innovative. The campaign included a number of activities such as raising awareness on rejecting all forms of violence against girls and women and collaborating the people's efforts with the government's efforts to combat violence. Dr. Maher Said, director of the Anti-Sexual Harassment and Violence Against Women Unit, said that the unit was established 3 years ago and was supported by Cairo University. She said that first of its kind in Egypt and the Middle East. Meanwhile, NCW member Dr. Suzanne Kallini talked about the media's projection of women, especially in drama and movies. She called for holding workshops of media people to communicate means of combating violence against women in the media. She added that all forms of violence affect women in a negative way. She also underlined NCW's rejection of the recent amendments to the child seeing law, adding that it is considered as one form of violence against women.
Welcome back, everyone. The United Nations for Women celebrates every day the 25th of November as International Women's Day. And after that, there are 16 days of activities to combat violence against women. And these activities target not only women, but also men, and try to merge them as being part in these activities. We'll be talking about these issues in details with our guest, Dr. Rawan Youssef. It's great having you with us, Dr. Rawan, especially that you participated in the recent conference that was held here in Egypt. We'll take a look at your profile, then we'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. As we mentioned earlier, the campaign Inti Al-Aham, or You're the One Who Matters, kicked off with the participation of both men and women, and there was a particular focus from the United Nations on the regional area, Arab countries. And the conference was held here in Egypt with the participation of so many dignitaries. And our guest today, Dr. Rawan Yusuf, also took part in the conference. So she is here to tell us more about the campaign and what has been achieved so far in efforts regarding combating violence against women. Once again, I'd like to welcome you, Dr. Rawan. Now, tell us more about the campaign.
Actually, the campaign started on the 25th of November, as you mentioned, because we have the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. We worked on having a social media campaign for days where we had celebrities say their own points of view about women and how they view women in the society. And it was a very successful online campaign. And then we had two events. The first event was held in Alexandria, and it was directed to the female Syrian refugees to do screening on the different health issues like diabetes, blood pressure, anemia, and others. And the second event is the one that you're talking about that was held on the 10th. And it was held in Intercontinental. And it was actually targeting also female Syrian refugees. And during the event...
If you don't mind, just try not to mention any names because
I will
this
try,
would be
I'm sorry.
considered as an advertisement. So
Okay,
please
apologize.
Thank you.
Well, actually, during the event, we had 3 Syrian refugees awarded for their efforts to help and support other female refugees here in Egypt.
Okay. What about efforts in combating violence against women here in Egypt?
Actually, when we mention violence against women, we're not only talking about women. We're talking about men, we're talking about governments, we're talking about international organizations, and we are also talking about families. So, and also when we mention violence, it's not only one form of violence. We have a lot of forms for violence against women.
Yes.
Like sexual harassment, rape, child marriage, verbal
abuse.
Domestic abuse, sexual abuse, and also we have like many forms of violence. So it's really hard to say that we are doing, we are doing a lot of efforts, but it's really hard to tell where we are right now. Okay. 3 years ago, the UN Women, they actually issued a report that stated that more than 99% of women and girls are subjected to one form or another of harassment on a daily basis. And that can tell that we have a big problem.
Yes.
So this big problem is not going to end overnight, but everybody is working right now to actually fight gender-based violence.
Okay. Gender-based violence and violence against women is an international phenomenon. It's not only here in the Arab world or in the Middle East, it's all over the world.
Yes.
But unfortunately, it has high rates here in our area, our Middle Eastern area.
Yep.
So perhaps women from all over the world can share their experiences and because it's not only limited to our area, it's not a domestic problem, it's an international one.
Exactly. That's why the 16 days of activism is actually an international campaign. So it goes everywhere. And as I told you, we do have many forms of violence. So in each country, we have more kinds are actually prevalent in certain countries than the others. So that's why we're not all working on the same kinds of violence. It depends where you are from.
Yes. Dr. Rawan, you also tried to involve men as being partners in this campaign, and I believe this is very important.
Definitely.
How did this go, especially here in Egypt?
Actually, we have the international campaign He for She that was launched a couple years ago. And here in Egypt, everybody would say that men are always against women and they just feel like they are weak and they don't do their work and they are supposed to stay at home and stuff like that. But for us, actually, the one who launched the You Are More Important campaign is a male, Dr. Amr Hassan. He actually was the one who launched this campaign, and this can tell a lot about involving men in the fight against violence against women. involving men is not an easy process because some of them feel like, oh, you're talking all the time about women and you're involving them in everything and you feel like they are victims all the time. But and they say, sometimes they actually say it in a funny way that, well, we are the victims right now because everybody's talking about women. But we do have a lot of men who actually are part of the campaign. And even during the 16 days on our social media campaign, we had 8 men who actually talked about the role of women and the importance of women in our society.
Okay. Online campaigns are also very important because they target the younger generations who are heavy users of the internet. And I believe if we have a problem, we need to deal with it from the grassroots level. So if we're talking about online users, a very young generation, these are the targets of any campaigns because this is the generation that's going to grow up carrying the message, understanding and knowing that. So I believe it was a very smart move to make online campaigns.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
How did it go, and how was the feedback that you got from it?
Actually, it was really successful because we had many people view the posts and we had many comments on the posts.
Did you put like videos and photos?
We put videos of the celebrities and their quotes. So you know, it's really nice when you have somebody who's a famous person and you share their views on something.
It attracts attention,
exactly. So that was a very nice move. And also, we had a very good feedback from everybody. And some people started asking us how we can get involved in the campaign and what can we do in order to combat violence against women.
Okay. Now, perhaps part of the problem, Dr. Rowan, and you perhaps understand that, is that not all women, at least in our society here in Egypt, know or understand that this is violence against them. I mean, they do not consider this as violence against them, as some sort of abuse, because it has been standardized one way or another.
Yes.
Especially with the lack of education. So you would find in many rural areas girls and women who are subject to domestic violence, to all sorts of abuse, and they take this as normal because they are used to that by their fathers and by their husbands and by their brothers. So they don't know that they are victims. They don't even realize that there is a problem. How do you tackle this problem?
Actually, that's very true. Let me give you an example. Sometimes when you talk about violence with somebody and you say that, personally, I believe that if your husband beats you up, that's considered violence. But some women would say that's considered manhood.
Yes.
So this is one example.
It would be a problem if she considers it as one way of love.
Exactly, I know. Yeah, and jealousy.
Like he's jealous.
Yeah, exactly.
He loves me and he's jealous, so it's okay.
Also, another form is actually female genital mutilation, which is a very critical issue. And everybody would say this is a religious thing and it's okay to do it, and all the young girls are subjected to that. But this is not even close to religion, nothing, like it's not even close. I would say that this is a very big problem. That's why we're holding different sessions, awareness sessions to women. And at the beginning of the session, I personally ask them to define what violence against women from their own point of view. And also I ask them to define what are the forms of violence that they are subjected to in their everyday life. So, and this way we are actually,
what did you get from them?
Well, it depends on the group. Actually, we had groups of refugees from Syria, and we had groups of refugees from Sudan, and we had Egyptian groups. But, and every group would say different stuff.
Such as?
Well, for Syria, for instance, they would talk about, you know, like beating them up, and about the political and the political issues they are facing in their own countries, like rape and stuff like that, and the war crimes. And also for Sudanese people, they actually talk more about FGM, the female genital mutilation. For Egyptians, they talk a lot about sexual harassment. So it depends on the group, and we take it from there. Once they define the different kinds of violence, we take it from there and we tell them that there are other forms, and we introduce it to them, and we see what their feedback is, so that we can know where we are.
Okay. Perhaps one other form of violence against women that is unfortunately very dominant here in Egypt is minor marriages.
Child marriage.
Or child marriage
Yes.
for young girls. And it is very spreading in certain parts that are known in the country, where elders, especially from Arab and Gulf countries, come to get married to
Yes.
14
Yes.
and 13-year-old girls. And there were actually so many articles written in the newspapers, and it was the focus of the media for some time, but still the problem is there. Some people talked about the legislation, and perhaps we need some amendment to the law for anyone who participates in this. Others talked about awareness, especially for the fathers or for the families who have young girls. So other talks about the role of the media and what role the media should play in raising this type of awareness and so on. So you tell me a little bit about your efforts in this regard.
Actually, when it comes to child marriage, it's a very sensitive issue. And let me tell you that Syrian people, their main issue, like one of the main issues they also discussed, was child marriage. Because
Really?
a lot of people would actually, the majority of them faced this problem, and they talked a lot about how they suffered later on. So during our awareness sessions, of course, we talk about child, we talk about the legal age of getting married, which is 18, because below the age of 18, you're considered a child. And when we mention a child, we don't mean that you play with dolls or you go out and play with children and stuff like that.
Talk maturity.
Exactly. So actually, according to the law, it's illegal to get married before the age of 18, but still people do this because they think it's better because it protects their girls. Yes, exactly. So all we do right now is just we talk to people, we try to raise awareness on this issue, and we get some people with experience on child marriage who faced the whole thing, and they went through the whole experience and shared their own experience with other people so that they can tell them, you cannot do this to your girl, because it actually makes her suffer a lot in her life. She cannot continue her education, even if she was offered the opportunity to continue her education. She will not be in the education.
This never happens.
Exactly.
Or it rarely happens. I think from what I've seen, it never happened. In so many cases, actually, the problem gets worse because if they have children, if she gets children,
responsibility.
It's either they are taken from her and they go to the country of origin of the husband, which is normally a Gulf country, or she is left with them and she's unable to pay for their expenses, for their education, and so on and so forth. So this actually creates another problem and creates another miserable generation.
Exactly. And also, I always say this sentence in my sessions. I just tell them, when you have a girl get married before the age of 18 and she has a baby, it means that a child is raising a child.
Exactly.
So it's really, it's a misery.
Yeah. Dr. Awan, throughout this program, Women's World, I've been discussing so many issues facing women, especially here in Egypt. And as we mentioned, few of them still remains so many problems. And unfortunately, despite the political support for women and having the year for women, and despite the political participation of so many women in all what we have been through, and how they play a role not only politically but also economically in small and medium enterprises, in taking part in the economy, in sharing in the responsibilities of men in everything, still the problems remain. We can see that not so many problems have been solved. The legislation is not so supportive for women. Actually, with the recent law that has been adopted by the parliament regarding the custody of the children, that it goes to, if a woman gets divorced, it goes to the man's or the father's wife. I mean, it's really strange. Are we moving forward or backward? And you, as a member of a foundation and an activist and someone who holds seminars and takes parts in conferences, how do you see all this?
Actually, as I told you before, that the efforts in each form of violence are different. It depends what kind of violence we're targeting. So if we're talking about child marriage, we have certain laws, we have certain sessions, we have certain efforts that are exerted in that field. And when we talk about sexual harassment, we do have other stuff. And so I believe that we are going forwards when it comes to some forms of violence, but we are still going backwards when it comes to other forms of violence.
Exactly.
So I believe that the solution to this problem is only one word: education. Education, education, education. And to be more specific, it's comprehensive sexuality education. When we mention comprehensive sexuality education, everybody would be surprised and they would say, oh, you're talking about sex, you're going to talk about sex with kids, and you're going to teach them to have sex at a young age. Not the case. We're talking about age-appropriate comprehensive sexuality education.
You know why they say such things and make such comments? Lack of education.
Exactly,
Again.
exactly. It's a vicious circle. So we need to work a lot on having comprehensive sexuality education in the school curricula, and we are actually working a lot with the government when it comes to that. I personally was part of the youth group that worked on the youth component in the national population strategy, and we talked a lot about having comprehensive sexuality education in school curricula.
Okay. Let's go back to the conference that was held here in Egypt recently. What were the recommendations made during the conference?
Actually, we came up with a day for Syrian Egyptian women, and it's the 10th of December. And we, as I told you, we award 3 female Syrian refugees on their efforts in supporting other female Syrian refugees in Egypt. And we also talked about the different forms of violence they face, and we had a performance that was done during the celebration. And everybody reacted to that they were like, oh, that's exactly what's happening. That's what we're facing. And we do hope that we can do something. And a lot of women actually, interesting, talked about how they can help. Even the Syrian women, they said, we need to know how we can help. We need to be, game changers at some point. So that was really...
Well, they actually are, because we can see them all over the country. They are working and they are selling products and they are being very active and they are very strong, trying to support themselves and their families, and even they are making their children join them, so
they can learn.
Yes, it's a good experience for so many here who complain of the lack of everything.
Exactly.
It's a good experience. Rawan Youssef, thank you very much for being with us in this edition of the program, and I hope to see you sometime soon when there are really more fruitful results, let me put it that way. More fruitful results when it comes to efforts in combating violence against women. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being with us in this edition of Women's World. I'm Helen Hamilawi signing off.